time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, thanks for being here. It is Friday, July 17th. You have made it through another week. Hopefully, you have good air to breathe today. The smoke has largely dissipated. Not that it can't come back, but I went out today and the air was no longer white. So, plan for the weekend. Try to avoid the smoke. Oh, and try to avoid the explosive diarrhea. And you know what? Then everything's good. Then all you have to worry about is the fall of our democracy. So, I guess we thank the universe for whatever we can get. Okay? By the way, everybody's focusing on lettuce. Even if you wash it, you might not get rid of those little parasites altogether. And apparently, any fruit or vegetable that has little nooks and crannies. Somebody told me that raspberries apparently are to be avoided. So just cook everything, okay? Just cook everything. On top of everything that you are going through politically in this life right now, you do not need explosive diarrhea on top of that. There's your little health PSA for Friday. Other than that, well, let's see where we are in the world today. Oh, yeah. Apparently, we've decided that it is not a war crime to attack civilian infrastructure and civilian targets. Remember the Looney Tune, Pete Hegseth, was like, there are no rules in war. Oh, God, I hope Pete Hegseth ends up in jail, please. If there is a God, at some point before I die, I want to see Pete Hegseth in an orange jumpsuit. So, yeah, we're attacking civilian infrastructure in Iran because apparently Donald Trump has decided that Pete Hegseth is right and there are no rules in war. Yeah, you know what? It's a hospital. So what? It does a water treatment plant. So what? It's, I don't think Donald Trump is going to end up in jail because I don't think he's going to live out his term. I know that he's got the best health care in the world. I know he has access to drugs that the rest of us will die before we get. So they're doing everything they can to keep him going. But God, he looks bad. He looks bad. Do you notice how we are 7 minutes after 2 and I still haven't talked about his speech last night? Yep. It was exactly what we thought it was going to be. He was really ticked that not everybody carried it. But it was a recycling of all the election stuff we already knew about. He tried to frame it somehow as something new. And he very clearly thought that that speech last night would be one of his many efforts to pave the way for some sort of disruption of the midterms, declaring the midterms are illegitimate, because he knows he's going to get creamed. And while he had lots of opportunities to do things that would have helped Republicans, he pretty much declined at every turn. Yeah. Affordability is a hoax. We're not going to talk about prices. Oh, but with our war in Iran again, the price of oil is going up again. Yahoo. The price of oil is going up again. And even though we do not get our oil from the tanker ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz, We are a global economy, kids. And everything is going to continue to get more expensive. Yep. So right after Trump's speech last night, as you might imagine, there was a lot of analysis. I think that one of the people who spoke most clearly about Donald Trump's speech is Congressman Jim Himes, who was on with Lawrence O'Donnell on MS Now last night. This was about an hour after Trump finished his, oh my goodness, there's election interference. And, so we might have to, go in and take all those ballots. And we might have to say that the election wasn't legitimate. Just telling you. I am just telling you what you can expect in the future. Luckily, while MAGA certainly will believe everything Trump says, there were plenty of voices saying this is a lie, this isn't true, and unless you're MAGA or unless you are Fox Cable devotee, you saw last night's speech what it was. An attempt to lay the groundwork to take some kind of action to derail the midterms. And the good news is that we see it coming. This isn't going to take us by surprise. Yes, he's going to try to do crazy things, and maybe Republican governors will feel they have to go along with him. Though, when he first went after the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia, remember that phone call? I just need 11,000 votes. Find me 11,000 votes. And Brad Raffensperger said, sir, the votes have been counted. They are what they are. There are no extra 11,000 votes sitting around for you. So maybe even a Republican will refuse to let him destroy our elections. But who knows? You can't expect a lot from them these days. So Jim Himes was on with Lawrence O'Donnell, and he talked about President Trump's speech of last night. Listen to this.
Let me not put any fine point on this. The President of the United States lied to the American public today. It was a bald-faced, 180-degree, obviously provable lie. Why do I say that? I have reviewed all of the intelligence that the president supposedly declassified, and there is absolutely nothing in that intelligence which that substantiates what he was saying. That Venezuela was doing this, that Russia and China was doing this. The conclusion of the intelligence community under Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe, his guy who's at CIA right now, was that there was no meddling. You can look at it. This is a public report. There was no meddling in the meddling meaning interference, no screwing around with vote totals, with voter lists, with machines, etc. Yes, Russia wanted to reelect Donald Trump. That is in there, too. And yes, Iran didn't want Donald Trump to win. And so they put out propaganda. They put out misinformation. But there is nothing in the record to suggest that anything that the president said tonight was true. And the reason I'm animated about this, by the way, for anybody out there who thinks that this is an MS Now, Lawrence O'Donnell Democrat talking, I want you to go to whitehouse.gov and I want you to open up the section on China. I've reviewed every single one of those documents, but you can't do that. And the reason you can't do that, and do it right now, and you will see that every single one of those China documents is almost entirely redacted. It is black line after black line after black. You can't read anything. There's individual words. There's maybe 20 words in 30 documents. By the way, if those documents did anything to prove the president's case, do you think they'd be redacted? No. You would have more than 12 words. Look at the Venezuela report. Please go to whitehouse.gov right now and look at the Venezuela report. And what you will see is an old report that says, hey, Maduro and Chavez before him, they wanted to influence, here's the key word, Venezuela elections.
Right.
But the president of the United States says, look, Venezuela wanted to influence elections. And so what the president did tonight was lie. And the issue I'm going to take with you, Lawrence, is that, yes, maybe it's partly about the SAVE Act, which is a ridiculous solution to a problem that does not exist. Foreigners do not vote in U.S. elections. That's the facts. But what worries me, and the reason you hear some emotion and some passion right now, is because here's the scenario. Election day is going poorly. John Ossoff has been clearly reelected. In Michigan, a Democratic senator has. So the House of Representatives is about to change hands to a Democratic majority and maybe even the Senate. And what do you think happens? I know what happens because I was stuck in the chamber on January 6, 2021, when a mob of thousands of people motivated by the president tried to stop the transfer of power. So when Donald Trump sees that those are the results, which are likely, he's going to say, remember in July when I told you that the Venezuelans and the Chinese, that's exactly what happened. So what we're talking about here is not about the SAVE Act, which is an abomination, but it is about setting the stage for Donald Trump to reject the results of the upcoming election. And every American citizen, and I know it's hard to reach some of the president's most closest acolytes, because I work with 220 of them in the United States House of Representatives. That's the Republican conference. But this is a moment for the American people to say, what is going on here? Look at whitehouse.gov, look at the China section, and look at document after document after document, which is nothing but black lines of redaction. That tells the story.
I think he has hit the nail on the head. That is exactly what the speech was about: misinformation, distortion, and lies, so that when it is apparent that he is losing in the midterms, he's already going to lose the House. I mean, there is still a chance that he may lose the Senate as well. And if that happens, like the cornered animal he is going to come out fighting for his life. And I'm sure that's actually, and that's not hyperbole, I'm sure that's how he sees it, that he will literally be fighting for his life. Because, you know, Democrats get a hold of things and they're going to investigate and they're going to hold hearings. And, you know, they in the House, they might impeach him again. He's been impeached twice and it didn't derail his political career at all. So I don't even know why he's worried about a third impeachment. Maybe he thinks if he's impeached a third time, then he really won't win the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay. Okie dokie. It is Friday. We are talking about the news of the day, the news of the week. We are taking your calls. We are reading your texts for the entire first half of the show today. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. Bob in Gurnee, you know, I told you about this EPA app called Air Now that I use. Bob in Gurnee texted in, airnow.gov is indicating that my air in Gurnee is still hazardous. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Bob. And so is the air in Chicago, and so is the air north of Chicago. But where I live, the air quality is down. The air quality index is down to 201. That is still very unhealthy. But last night, it was over 900. It was so high that the little graph didn't go that high. The needle was just pinned at the top. So to go from 900 down to 200, yes, it is still very unhealthy. I don't mean to make light of that. And if you are somebody who has lung disease, compromised immune system, very old, very young, because the very old and the very young, their immune systems just don't work as well, you should definitely still be careful. But I'll take 200 over 900 any day of the week. And it is dropping. It is dropping. Today, it's very unhealthy. Tomorrow, the prediction is that it will be unhealthy for sensitive groups. But like I said, I left the house just about an hour and a half ago, and the air was no longer white. Yesterday, when I left the house, it looked like the whole neighborhood was filled with fog. Only it wasn't fog. It was smoke. And it was everywhere, and it was thick, and it was awful. I've got a couple of pieces of sound about the Canadian wildfires. One is very serious and inspiring, and one is a little bit on the ridiculous side. Let's start with serious and inspiring. This is Governor Tim Walz, who needed to get some of his people rescued by the Canadians. They were north of the border of Minnesota. And this is an example of how allies help one another. This is an example of cooperation. Remember cooperation? Remember when we used to support Canada and Canada supported us? This isn't completely gone. And it is apparent from what Tim Walz went through and his dealings with the Prime Minister of Ontario. Anyway, listen to this.
I had been in contact late last night with Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He just called back and his team made contact with this. We have, and you'll hear more details on this from Commissioner Cunningham, we have two groups of YMCA campers that were north of the border in remote areas where the fires are burning pretty heavily. Premier Ford said it looks like nighttime in Toronto this morning. The smoke was so heavy. But I am pleased to report that that the first group will be out in the next hour. They have been spotted, and the Canadian Air Force is assisting in the extraction. The second group of campers is on a sandbar in the middle, and they are safe at this time. It's going to take a little more because they're remote to get to them. Commissioner will update you. This information was in the last few minutes that we're getting, but I'm just going to stress my deep gratitude to Premier Ford, to the people of Canada, have always been there. It took one call, and over the night, all their forces were activated to go and rescue Minnesota campers from the Y. And that speaks volumes to our neighbors from Canada, our friends who've always been there. And I am just incredibly grateful that in conjunction with the incredible folks, with a thank you to our firefighters, to our teams that are out there, to all of the folks who are putting themselves at risk, that at this point in time, we don't have any injuries, and the fires, while they continue to burn, are being monitored and attacked in a proper way.
Yep, that's how neighbors help one another. Remember a long time ago, I interviewed Todd Maffin. He's been the guy who has been. He did what he called the Nanaimo infusion. He lives in Nanaimo. And once a year, they have this big celebration where they invite people from the United States to come up and visit their town. First time he threw it out there, just apropos of nothing, 500 people showed up. This last time he did it, I think there were well over 1,000 people who showed up. And we talked to him. He is... He's a very funny, he's a very satirical guy. He knows a lot about Canadian history. He pays attention to current events. He occasionally just does some silly things. But he's also been responsible for getting towns, Canadian towns all around the U.S. border, to create websites. If you are a medical professional, Canada wants you to come up and work for them. And these websites are all about, if you want to live in Canada, how, with the kind of people they're looking for, the kind of people they can help, and you make an application and they try to smooth the path for you, make it easier for you to make that transition to Canada. There have been a significant number of doctors and nurses who have made the trip. So Todd Maffin is responsible for that effort and has helped other communities create these websites. But he was also talking about the Canadian fires. Tim Walz speaking heartfelt about the cooperation and how good people can work together and how these these YMCA campers are being rescued and looked after. But not all the people in the United States have been quite so kind to Canada. Todd Maffin recently published, I guess you would call it a rant. It's funny, but it's not. Listen to this.
Well, here we are again. The Americans are mad at us because they've just learned that jet streams don't honor borders. Some of them spending their constituents' time writing actual news releases titled, "Canada's apologies won't clear Michigan skies." This is the third consecutive year we've had to write to Canadian officials about a crisis that Canada has the tools to prevent and has chosen not to. I'm sorry, are you at a Walmart right now? This is like every Karen video I've seen in every U.S. mall. I reported this to your manager last week, and I'm still waiting for an apology. Shut the f*** up. I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. I am actually here to apologize for the audacity, nay, the terrorism of letting our forests spontaneously combust and sending their smoky death tendrils across the border to sully your fine American lungs. How dare we? I mean, after all, your country has done everything it possibly could to combat climate change, pulling out of climate agreements, expanding oil drilling, gutting the EPA, and vilifying Greta Thunberg as if she snuck into Texas oil fields and replaced them all with yoga retreats. Surely fire's not a natural phenomenon exacerbated by the global warming that you're, mostly responsible for. Nobody could predict that. Certainly not Representative Jack Bergman, who's accepted more than $500,000 from the energy and natural resource sectors. No, it's obviously a personal attack on America. A maple-scented missile of woke environmental warfare. We admit it. The smoke was intentional, coordinated. Our forest fires are a false flag operation conducted by transgender Antifa beavers pushing socialized medicine, and shame on us for failing to pack it up in Ziploc bags and store it neatly above the 49th parallel, like good neighbors should. We should have known that the jet stream, a long-standing secret Canadian weapon, would betray us and float into your pristine cities like Los Angeles, where the air is very clean, but for some reason you can actually chew it. Tell us what you need, America, because clearly you're the real victims here. Not the people in Canada losing homes to wildfires, not entire towns burning to the ground. No. You. Just trying to enjoy a watery beer in Lansing, but you can't because the air looks orange. So again, from the bottom of our burning boreal hearts, we apologize. Next year, we promise to get your permission before our forests combust, or better yet, we'll just pave them. In fact, I propose a three-step process for addressing these Republican lawmakers' discomfort for being so close to us. Step one, go f*** yourselves. Yeah, actually, it was just that one step.
Yep. It is Canadians' weaknesses that led to this fire that made our air hard to breathe. And I love that. Did you hear that? Maple-scented missile of woke. Yes, Canada is attacking us with a maple-scented missile of woke. By the way, I saw the headline that he made reference to, where it was Canada was accused of basically doing a violent act against the state of Michigan by letting the smoke from their fires get to Michigan. Yeah, that's us too. We're the Tim Walls, but we're also the people Todd Maffin's talking about. We are going to take a break. It is Friday. The text lines are open. The phone lines are open. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday. In case you were a little confused, it is Friday. And on Friday, we spend the first half of the show reading your texts, taking your calls, talking about the news of the day. Got this text from Richard about, Trump's plan to steal the 2028 election, if, of course, he's still alive. He's trying to, quote unquote, protect elections. That's why he's fired all the election commission members. And that's why he told Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen to tell the states that they have to get all of their voting information and their voting rolls. They have to give all that to the government, or they're going to lose federal funds. Because, that's how we keep ourselves safe. Remember when he fired his very own head of, he was a big tuna in a lot of different areas, but one of them was cybersecurity, and he had the audacity to come out and say the 2020 election was free and fair. Whoo! Yeah, that didn't go over well. And, he's still in that same headspace. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Jim is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Jim.
Hi, Joan. Let's start with the person who's trying to run our intelligence operation. They asked him several times, who won the 2020 election? He refuses to answer. They asked Trump's mouthpiece, where's the 3 million pages about germane to Jeffrey Epstein? He won't answer. Then we go on to this. The poor guy that set up the teleprompter for Trump was tempted, and he bet $100,000 that Trump was going to say these particular words, and he was caught at it. The poor guy. Now, when you're hanging around with people with quick buck artists, that's all you hear all day long. You get tempted. You think, well, these guys are getting away with murder. Maybe I'll tip in my foot. Well, he got caught, and then Trump said he belongs in jail. Anyway, but all he had to do is the bet should be just talk about money. That's all he talks about is money, how rich we are and how rich he's made us. But I don't know why they have to look for a word to bet, because the first thing that came out of his mouth is money. And but overall, now that was the first performance that I actually sat there attentively and watched, and I thought to myself, this is the most pathetic individual I've ever seen giving some kind of a public speech. He's condemning Channel 5, condemning Channel 7. Everything's the deep state, which has no meaning at all. And what would a deep state mean? I mean,
that just means that there are people in government who are trying to follow the laws and follow the rules when he doesn't want them to. So they are thwarting him. Therefore, they are the deep state.
Right. And
see how that works?
Those people work hard. They get up every day, shower, put their clothes on, go to work. That's conspiring over the coffee pot in the morning. How we're going to thwart Republicans. I mean, that's what he's trying to say. It's just, but it was so pathetic. I've never seen anything that pathetic. And I'm not worried. I mean, of course you got to worry, because the problem is, he's talking to his base constantly. These are 20 million people in America who believe this guy. Yesterday, I'm coming home. Just a real quick example. Coming home, got the mask on. This guy's got a mask on. I said, what a weird day this is. He goes, yeah, it's a weird day. I said, well, how about that president we got? Talking about weirdos. So then I thought he was, then he goes, he's a patriot. He's a patriot. The Democrats are destroying the country. No, but honest to God, now this is just a collision with another individual. The point is, you've got 20 million people running around who think this old timer is I don't know, got some superpower or something. But he doesn't, and we'll get out of this because, as you say, Joe, we're going to swamp them. And they can do whatever they want. But what's terrible about it is the interworkings of the government. The Attorney General, this guy that's running our intelligence community, head chef is nuts with testosterone. I mean, think of it, testosterone. You know what Hitler invented? He didn't invent it, but amphetamines were huge in the German army. They started, in fact, that's where amphetamines came from. You know, they get so geeked up on amphetamines that they could charge and they felt no hunger or anything else. They could just keep going. But I mean, absolutely nuts. But the sad part about it is, billions are being killed, immigrants are being killed. We have Americans shot in the street. That's the tragedy of this.
Yeah.
I know they believe in Trump, but look at the results of it, Joan.
Yep.
Anyway, it's feel a little bit better.
And you know
here.
that guy that you talked to, I don't know if you asked him or not, but I bet you with every confidence I have that he only watches Fox. And if you only watch Fox, you do not have an accurate feel for what is really going on in the world. That's the only reason I could think that he would say Trump was a patriot.
Well, yeah, but the way he said it so emphatically, which was so strange to hear in any generation. I mean, I'm pretty much an old-timer, and I've never heard anybody ever say Jimmy Carter is a patriot or whoever it is, you know. And first, patriotism is the last bastion of a scoundrel, Joan. Remember that. Patriotism is the last bastion of a scoundrel, because you can hide a lot of things if you play off that you're a patriot. When in reality you're anything but. But anyway, Joe, at least I think this thing is clearing up, isn't it? What a nightmare this is with this, you know, between pandemics and forest fires and this Trump and I mean.
And don't forget the explosive diarrhea. For God's sake.
Who can forget that? You can't eat a piece of lettuce for the next 12 months. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Joe. Have a restful weekend, and thanks for taking my call. Thank you,
restful. Okay, there's a goal.
Yeah.
I am going to spend. Jim said I should have a restful weekend, so I think that means I need to spend the entire weekend in bed. I'm perfectly capable of that. That works for me on so many levels.
Yeah, good, Joe. Maybe you have something decent to read. I've taken up. Especially now that I have nothing to do.
Have Ray wait on me hand and foot and bring me food.
Right,
mm-hmm.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So
but you know, if he wants to get me out of bed, you know, he's going to bring me a salad, right?
Look out.
You got to watch that guy.
For that. Alfred Hitchcock rides again. Anyway, Joe.
Thank you, Jim.
You, thank you.
Thank you. We got this text. I told you at the beginning of the show that, of course, we are still at war with Iran, and apparently we have given up any pretext of following any kind of Geneva Convention rules, and we are quite openly attacking civilian infrastructure, bridges, water plants in the Middle East. We are attacking water plants. You know, maybe you could make an argument that if the military is using a bridge, it's a military target, but a water plant? Really? And there has been some damage to a hospital because, we're that's how we wage war now. Somebody texted in, our ignorant administration is literally amassing war crimes on a daily basis. Trump is the same war criminal as Putin is at this point. I wish I could disagree with you and make an argument that that's not true, but it is. Fred texted in. Apparently, Fred watched. Talk about bringing two big news stories together. Fred watched the Donald Trump speech last night and texted me this. And I promise I will move off of this subject after this. Joan, I witnessed a bad case of explosive diarrhea last night, and it was broadcast live. Okay. Thank you, Fred, for that. I will try to rein in my fascination with explosive diarrhea. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Oh, we are reading your texts and taking your calls. Got this one just fairly recently. Heard on TV last night that our elections are totally corrupt and unreliable. We have no choice but to start over and elect a new president. Okay, it makes sense to me. And here's another one. Hi, Joan. Every day is Festivus and the airing of grievances for that petty little man. Have a good weekend, Laura. I was not familiar with Festivus, so over the break I had to look it up. It became popular when it was part of a Seinfeld episode. Festivus occurs December 23rd and includes a dinner, an unadorned aluminum Festivus pole, and practices such as the, quote, airing of grievances and, quote, feats of strength. Yeah. Well, I guess with Donald Trump, every day is Festivus because, you know, a day without a grievance is like a day without sunshine. Let's go to the phone lines. Ron is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron.
Yes, Trump must have been practicing a speech for 3 days with the raised eyebrows and the hand gestures and the hesitations, you know.
Well, yeah. And, you know, since he doesn't have his normal teleprompter guy, I bet he had more than one teleprompter because, you know, his teleprompter guy has been arrested for insider trading.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a mystery how foreign countries can get our voter information, but Mark William Mung can't get information.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that today marks 20 weeks since we started bombing Iran, so doesn't look like there's any end in sight.
I think that Donald Trump is desperate for an end. He's just not smart enough to figure out how to bring it about.
No. And one more thing, a little history. On July 22nd, 1934, public enemy number one, John Dillinger, was shot by the Biograph Theater in Chicago. And the woman who sent him up, she was an illegal immigrant here, and she made a deal with the FBI that she could stay here if she pointed him out. But,
I knew it was a woman who ratted on him. I think there was even a movie. Was it called The Woman in Red or something like that?
Oh, yeah, there were a couple movies. Mm-hmm. And after he was shot, she was deported anyway.
Ah.
So some things never change. But,
I guess. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but now instead of J. Edgar Hoover, now we have J. Edgar Boozer. That's about the only difference.
I don't even think Kash Patel deserves that. I think he is. You know, all of the cabinet members and leaders of departments are incompetent, but he's stupid as well as incompetent, and he's crazy.
Yeah, and also yesterday the FBI had a team of agents investigating the reflection pool for vandalism. That's our text.
Oh my God! You know, they keep saying that there's all these pictures that show somebody cutting it. Donald Trump even said at one point there was a video. Why haven't they released any of that? Since, you know, that really made me mad when Dana Bash was talking to Doug Burgum, and she said, you know, like, do you believe that the reflecting pool was vandalized? Do you believe that? And he was like, oh, there are pictures. And the follow-up question, Dana Bash, should have been, okay, show us the pictures. Release the pictures. Everybody keeps saying there's proof. Nobody shows anybody the proof. So can you blame Mr. Burgum, the public, for not believing you? You know, but no, we can't have those kind of follow-ups. That would be too much like journalism.
Yeah. All right. Thank you much. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, Ron has hit a sore spot with me. Did you notice that? When I see people who have the opportunity, whether it's Meet the Press and Kristen Welker or anybody, any anchor that sits down with a government leader or Trump, oh, well, let's see. I'm going to ask him a tough question, but then I'm going to let him lie, and then I'm going to move on because then I get the credit. Oh, I asked him a tough question. Yes, but he lied to you and you didn't follow up. I'm sorry. That, to me, is you don't get any points for that. Somebody texted in how I said that I hoped at some point I could see Pete Hegseth go to jail. And of course, if he's go to jail, chances are he'd be wearing the classic orange jumpsuit. Somebody texted in, no orange jumpsuit for keg breath. I want to see him go through U.S. Marine boot camp as a brand new recruit, then Navy, Army, and Air Force boot camps, then let the SEALs have Mr. Testosterone for a while. Then once, if he makes it through the boot camps, he can be tried and he can go to Leavenworth and spend his life making big rocks into little rocks. Actually send all the Trump minions through the same system and T-Rump's spawn too. Yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine Eric or Don Jr. in the military? One of them, and I think it might have been Don Jr., long before Donald Trump was ever in politics, it was reported that Don Jr. said to him that he was thinking about maybe joining the military. And Donald Trump's response, this guy who's now the commander-in-chief, he told his son that if he joined the military, he would disinherit him, that he would turn his back on him. That's the respect with which Donald Trump holds our military. Let's go back to the phone lines. Dave from Hoffman Estates is on the line. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. Yeah, that Trump, with these followers, like what Jim had said earlier, and you said, and these guys, don't they kind of remind you of back in the 70s, the Moonies?
Oh, my.
Or the same thing, dear leader, and they were just in a trance, like self-hypnotized.
Yep.
Like you used to run into them at the airport.
Yep. The people who follow Jim Jones, the Moonies, yep. There are always people who are susceptible to cults. And, I read a lot about all the psychology behind the MAGAs and different segments of the MAGAs. And the bottom line is that people who join cults, they're very weak people and they don't like thinking for themselves. They feel much safer if they can follow somebody who tells them what to do, when to do it, what to wear, and what to think. That is safe for them because they don't have to do that scary process of thinking for themselves and trying to figure things out for themselves. It is a weakness.
And didn't they, on Southern, they used to have to deprogramming these people, mm-hmm. and it was quite the process, that they were so indoctrinated by whoever the dear leader was, be it was Moon or if it was Jim Jones. But the question, said in the past, where Netanyahu used to tried to get through to Clinton, Obama, all these other guys to go after Iran. They wouldn't do it. How come he didn't get through to Trump in his first term?
That's interesting. Well, there's a lot of belief that the reason Trump didn't cause this much trouble in the first term, I don't believe he expected to win the election. And I think when he won the election, I think he was terrified because he knew nothing about government. He knew nothing about the job. He was terrified that he was so far in over his head. So who did he get for his cabinet positions and to lead government agencies? He hired people with expertise, people who knew what they were doing. And those people put the reins on him. And, from everything that I've read about him, he realized that if he got a second term, to get the stuff done he wanted to get done, he couldn't have experts. He needed to have sycophants. And that way he could, that's exactly what he did. And look, it's working. Because in his first term, he was the only person who wasn't an adult in the room. And he was terrified, so he listened to the Jim Mattises and the John Kellys of the world. And he realized that they kept him from doing the horrible things he wanted to do.
Yeah, no, okay, fair point on that. They were the remaining guardrails, as they would say. But, and then, he did say this one is his retribution tour, but... he didn't. if I recall right, he never even had written any kind of a speech, like an acceptance or a speech either. When they found out that he won.
Well, I remember reading somebody wrote about right before the election took place, and he got together his kids and Melania, and he was talking about the last days or weeks of the campaign. And I don't know if he reported this to Michael Wolff or somebody was in the room, but the report was that Melania started crying. She wanted no part of this. She wanted no part of political life. And he apparently looked at Melania and said, "Don't worry, it's going to be over soon." He ran for president to increase his name recognition and his profile so he could be a bigger television star. He had no intention of winning.
Okay, yeah. Well, didn't they also say that night that the SEALs got Bin Laden at that where the reporters and the politicians rip on each other, and then he ripped on Trump a few times, and that kind of triggered him to run for president?
I don't know. I think from what I read, Donald Trump has always thought he could be and should be president. That back as far as 2014, he met with some Republican strategists about what it would take to run for president. So it's always been in the back of his mind. The popular myth is that during the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Barack Obama made fun of him, and that's when he made up his mind that he was going to run for president. And I don't know how much truth there is in that, but I do know from reports he had been exploring what it would take to run for president for many years. Because, he used to be a Democrat. Right. The person who wrote about these early conversations said that Donald Trump said, well, if I ever do run, it'll be as a Republican because Republicans are stupid and it will be easier for me to take over that party than the Democratic Party.
Right. And if I recall right, on his last wedding, didn't he have the Clintons or even invited?
Yes. He gave money to the Clintons.
Yeah.
He made political donations to the Clintons.
Let me, real quick, I'll go through this last thing so you can get others. What you're talking about with this escalation that Trump is just doing now with this U.S.-Iran war. He's striking like Iranian bridges at airports and infrastructure surrounding the critical Strait of Hormuz choke point. And then Iran has hit back with attacks on the UAE, Qatar, and other Gulf states, as well as allegedly targeting U.S. Special Forces outpost in Syria, and then Tehran has responded by hitting a power and desalination plant in Kuwait. So
it's a mess, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. But like we were saying yesterday or whatever, when if he does get that wild hair and decide to go attack that Karg Island, it would be bloody.
Yes, it is.
Because with all this bombing, I ain't heard much about Iranian soldiers as KIAs, and I'm sure they got caves all over that island and all, because they've been waiting allegedly for 47 years to kill Americans. So, anyway, let me get off. Okay. Have yourself a good weekend. Stay cool. And
thank you very much, Dave.
Be well, Joan.
You too. And we're all focusing on the Strait of Hormuz, which is of course a choke point. But there have been reports recently that the Iranians are trying to also talk to the people who control, it's Bab el-Mandeb. That is the choke point on the other side. And the other side, it's of the Red Sea. And if both of those are shut down, then things, let's just put it this way, things are going to get much, much, much worse. And that is supposedly something that Iran is trying to negotiate. One last text real quick before we go to the news from Kankakee Carl. Joan, so much time and effort could be saved if we call everything that comes out of Trump's mouth a lie, unless proven otherwise. Repeat, all lies unless proven otherwise. Simple, easy peasy. I agree with you, Carl, because the man lies like a rug. We are going to take a break for news and then get back to, remember it is Friday, so we're going to spend another half hour taking your calls, reading your texts, talking about the news of the day. 773-763-9278. If you've never called in before and you just can't remember all those numbers, think of it this way: 773-763-WCPT. We'll be back after the news.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
There is another big news story we need to talk about. It is Friday. We spend the first half of the show every Friday taking your calls, reading your texts, talking about the news of the day. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. Yes, I'm running a little behind on the text line. I will catch up momentarily. But there's big news out of Wisconsin. The Lieutenant Governor, Sarah Rodriguez, has been running for governor and has been a front runner to the extent that two other folks both dropped out of the race, and they gave her the endorsement. Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, though, has, at least as of today, left the Wisconsin governor's race. She has bowed out of the Wisconsin governor's race. Her campaign manager made an absolute mess of her finances. There were donations nobody knew. Apparently there's a bunch of donations and nobody knows which ones are real, which ones are not real. It is utter chaos. Pat Kreitlow in Up North News wrote this: "It's not so much that someone cooked the books on the Rodriguez campaign. It's that the book was thrown into a wood chipper with no clear picture of which donations were real, which expenses were missing, and whether or not Rodriguez could get back on track." Sarah Rodriguez has decided that she cannot get back on track. Pat Kreitlow, who himself has been an anchor on television, has run for office, has held office, and now reports for Up North News. You can find it at upnorthwi.com. He looked at what Sarah Rodriguez is going through his own lens of experience and wrote this: "Rodriguez is putting on a brave face, but I have run in 3 elections and cannot fathom the feeling of having someone you deeply trusted do the kinds of things that cause you to risk losing everything you've worked for. I have reported on countless news stories about hardworking people, from small businesses to little leagues, who lost it all because someone close to them embezzled funds or got caught up in a cascade of mistakes. It leaves a wound that will never fully heal." Sarah Rodriguez has decided that she is leaving this race for governor. One of the people who had previously dropped out and thrown his support behind her has been urged recently to get back into the race. That is David Crowley, who's a Milwaukee County executive, but he has a pretty decent war chest. I want to share with you what Sarah Rodriguez said about this heartbreaking decision. Listen to this.
"I want to start by thanking my family and every single person who showed up for this campaign over the past week. Your support has meant more than I can put into words. As we have continued to dig into our financial reports, it has become clear that there are issues that would be an ongoing distraction, not just for this campaign, but for the primary and for Wisconsin. This race is too important to let that happen. I am deeply hurt and betrayed by what happened. As I said on Monday, part of being a leader is taking swift action, doing the right thing, and being as honest as possible when there's a problem. I got into this race because I wanted what was best for Wisconsin, and that hasn't changed. And because I believe that, I cannot, in good conscience, allow these questions to become a cloud over an election that Democrats need to win. Wisconsin deserves better than that. This was never just about any one race or any one candidate. This is about protecting Wisconsin from a legislature hell-bent on putting corporations over schools and insurance companies over patients. It's about showing the rest of the country that we can win here, govern here, and fight for the middle class, and that Wisconsin will lead the way. To everyone who showed up, knocked doors, made calls, and believed in what we were building, please don't stop. Wisconsin has always been a place of resilience where everyday citizens show up and accomplish extraordinary things. Better days are ahead because of people like you. Let's keep fighting. I'll be right there with you.
Sarah Rodriguez exiting the race for governor of Wisconsin. She was the front runner. People were dropping out of the race and throwing their support behind her until it has become known that her top staffer, her number one, had what is described as massively mismanaged her campaign finances. And a part of you might be thinking, well, it wasn't Sarah Rodriguez who did this, so why not just say, we've just discovered this person's like a crook and we're getting rid of her and we're readjusting and moving on. But at this point in the campaign, this late in the campaign, I'm sorry, but the buck stops here. When you are running for office, part of what you are judged on is not just your ideas and your policies, but your ability to bring qualified, smart, competent people into the fold. The very top lieutenant, the campaign manager, apparently nobody was watching. Everybody had faith. Everybody had faith. But if you don't have, and maybe this is unfair, but if you don't have the wherewithal to pick good people, particularly your number two, then what's to say that you will pick good people as governor? If you've been governor for a year, will it suddenly come out that all the people closest to you are crooks? Because that's essentially what's happened. The person she chose to believe, to rely on, is probably going to face some pretty serious charges. And Sarah Rodriguez has to take responsibility for that. Maybe if this had been uncovered several months ago and Rodriguez could have gotten rid of this person and then said, you know what? We did this audit. We found this person who we all trusted was lying to us. We've gotten rid of them. We are better than ever. That she could have recovered from it. But at the last minute, no, there's just not time. So a lot of people are encouraging David Crowley to get back into the race. He has a lot of campaign funds. He has a pretty big war chest. And many people, perhaps cynically, are suggesting that if you're going to get in and try to take over the field at this late date, you need all the money you can get your hands on. So we shall see how this shakes out. Some great reporting on this by Pat Kreitlow. If you are not already a subscriber to Up North News, I strongly urge you to do it. Wisconsin is a politically volatile state, and this kind of thing, while unusual, maybe less unusual with the kind of volatility that Wisconsin has seen. You can subscribe at upnorthnewswi.com. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with calls and texts, and we're going to talk a little bit about Todd Blanche. Yep, you know him, you love him, you can't live without him. We'll be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
It is Friday. We talk about the news of the day. For the first half of the show, we have one more little 15-minute segment before we start going on to our guests. If you would like to join the conversation, that number, 773-763-9278. Much as I do not want to, I feel that we need to come up to speed on Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche agreed to meet with the Epstein survivors privately. You know why? Because Tom Tillis on the Judiciary Committee, Tom Tillis, prominent Republican, flat out said, I will not vote for you unless you meet with these people. The Epstein survivors have been trying to meet with Todd Blanche for a year. They tried to meet with Pam Bondi before that. She also would have nothing to do with them. One of the people who testified, because, you know, they're interviewing Todd Blanche, but they're also getting testimony from other people about Todd Blanche and whether or not he'd be any good. Remember our good friend Liz Oyer? Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney who got fired because she refused to return weapons privileges to a convicted domestic abuser? Yeah. She was fired by Todd Blanche. She testified before the Judiciary Committee, and then she joined MS Now to talk about that testimony and why she thinks that Liz Oyer and Todd Blanche are oil and water. They are not the same, and Todd Blanche should not be confirmed. She was talking to Chris Hayes. This was after she had testified before the Judiciary Committee. Let's listen to this.
He really can't articulate a single instance in which he has ever disagreed with the president or pushed back on him. The only brakes that are being put on this Justice Department are external to the department itself. It's really wild, Chris, that what it takes to get Todd Blanche to meet with the Epstein survivors is Tom Tillis essentially putting a gun to his head. Senator Tillis said today, I will not vote for your nomination unless you meet with these women who have been asking to meet with you for over a year. That says a lot. It really says everything we need to know about Blanche's character and his motivations. He's desperate to keep this job. That's the only reason he is checking this box by meeting with these women whose obligation he is under to protect. It's very similar with what's happening with the slush fund as well. The Republican senators got upset about Blanche going too far by giving Donald Trump our money through the form of this settlement agreement, and that is what has caused Blanche to start to back off of that. He has no internal moral compass or guardrails. Right. He is totally beholden to Donald Trump. That's the clearest description of Todd Blanche I've ever seen. Remember when he was testifying before the Judiciary Committee, and he wants to be head of the Department of Justice, and one of the people on the committees asked him, are you still President Trump's lawyer? And he said yes. Oh, conflict of interest much?
Liz Oyer wasn't the only one who spoke to the Judiciary Committee. Danny Bensky did too. She's an Epstein survivor, and she spoke to the Judiciary Committee yesterday. Listen to this.
In my school, if a student released a nude photo depicting a peer's sexual assault and abuse, they would almost certainly face expulsion. And yet, this is what our Department of Justice did to crime victims. Today, Todd Blanche has been at the helm of the release of nude images of survivors, the outing of Jane Does, and the exposure of more than 100 victims identifying information and documents describing horrific acts of abuse, including my own. Instead of treating this release as its own violation and holding the man who led it accountable, you have a decision on whether you place him in the highest law enforcement position in this country. In December, before the document release, our attorneys submitted 350 victims' names to the Department of Justice as victims' names to be redacted prior to the release. In that first release, I found my name in 2 places. In that next release in January, my name appeared again, but this time the redactions were so far worse. The files displayed not only my name, but my phone number, my former addresses, where I worked, and other identifying information. When my name appeared in the third file release, it became difficult to believe that this was not intentional. Despite my lawyer repeatedly contacting the DOJ, seeking protection, my information continued to be exposed. And it's not just my name, it's the identifying information. These documents contain disturbing yet incomplete accounts of my abuse. They were available not only for the entire world to see, but my child, my students, my friends, my employers, my colleagues, and my family. It was humiliating. Worse, my FBI 302 exposed a Jane Doe who had fought for decades to conceal her identity. It's been absolutely devastating. Outing survivors causes real and irrevocable harm. While coping with our emotional distress and psychological trauma, we also have lost our privacy and confidentiality, suffered reputational harm, lost jobs, and now fear for our personal safety. We are not activists. We are crime victims. For us, this has never been about politics. It has been about getting justice for the crimes committed against us. And the redactions are not the only problem with Todd Blanche's nomination. Todd Blanche has never attempted to listen to us, the crime victims. Survivors in this room repeatedly asked to meet with Todd Blanche through multiple channels. He never responded. Yesterday, he said he would meet with us, with our attorneys, if they were present. But let's be clear, that was the first time that was ever communicated to us before yesterday. He simply ignored us for the last 8 months. He has been radio silent, and the silence was deafening. Crime victims deserve better from the nation's highest level of law enforcement officials. We deserve to be heard directly, not dismissed and ignored.
Do you think that's going to sway the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee? Todd Mappin? Oops. I'm sorry. You know, it helps if you turn your mic on before you start talking. Do you think Danny's statement is going to affect anybody, especially any Republican on the Judiciary Committee? Because I don't think it will. I am glad she did what she did, even though it was clearly very, very difficult for her. But I think that nobody, even though privately they understand that Todd Blanche is corrupt. He has probably broken the law. There's a movement to take away his law license in New York. He is being accused of perpetrating a fraud on the court, which basically means you go to court with information that you know is all lies, and you try to get the court to sign off because that will give you some sort of legitimacy or protection. But you know what you're asking the court to do is wrong. Todd Blanche should be in jail. He should not be sitting before the Senate Judiciary Committee. But Todd Blanche knows that he's going to be confirmed. He's going to be, his nomination is going to be sent from the committee to the entire Senate body, and they are going to confirm him as head of the DOJ. And Donald Trump, in that speech last night, tried to lay the groundwork for confiscating election materials, for federalizing elections, for trying to plant the seeds that the midterms are going to be corrupt. Therefore, he has to do something about it. Todd Blanche is going to rubber stamp anything Donald Trump wants to do. Anything. We're already seeing Mark Wayne Mullen tell states that if they don't give all their voting rolls material to the federal government, they're going to lose out on federal money, because that's a thing. Donald Trump may be awful, but Donald Trump would not be able to cause the trouble he is causing now and is about to cause for the midterms. He would not be able to do that if there were not people like Mr. Blanche who are willing, just like our Supreme Court, to twist the law into any shape necessary to accomplish Trump's goals, because that's what it's about. Mr. Blanche realizes he has no career at this point without Donald Trump. So, man, you better go all in. It's terrible. He is clearly an awful choice, but there is no indication that there is any Republican on the committee that's going to vote against him. Joni Ernst thought she could save her political career by signing off on Pete Hegseth. Didn't work out that way. But for whatever reason, we are going to be faced with Todd Blanche as the head of the Department of Justice. Just wrap your head around it, kids. Just one more hurdle we're going to have to overcome in the midterms. We're going to take a break. We're going to talk about stories from the states when we come right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
There is a podcast that I would strongly urge you to subscribe to. It is called Stories from the States, and it is a great way to find out what is happening in this country. And as we all know, the state legislatures are petri dishes where both good and bad ideas sometimes grow out of control. It is not something we can take our eye off of. Chris Fitzsimons is with the Stories from the States, which is put out, by the way, from the States newsroom, and joins us whenever we can both get our schedules together to talk about whatever is in the latest episode. Chris, how are you?
I am well, Joan. How have you been?
I have been peachy. I have been sweating. It is hot and humid here. And then the last couple of days, it has been hot and humid and smoky, which is just kind of a trifecta of a beautiful summer, don't you think?
Well, yeah, we haven't gotten the smoke yet where I am, but it's definitely hot and humid. So,
I walked out of my front door yesterday and the air was white. It looked like a big fog had rolled in, except that it smelled like you were walking through somebody's fireplace after they had a big fire and you were walking through all the ashes. It was extraordinary. Climate crisis. You love it.
That's
you
right.
love it. You can't get away from it. There's so many things that I want to talk to you about. Before we get to this episode of Stories from the States, did you watch the speech? What did you think of Trump?
Well, I think you have to use the word speech liberally there. I'm not sure what that was. I think that that seemed to disappoint everybody. Disappointed people who thought, as I do, that I don't know what he's talking about other than trying to threaten the upcoming election or make us all worried. And then I think even his supporters, I'm not sure what the point of that was. It was I thought it was fairly incomprehensible, to tell you the truth, and not delivered with much passion or nuance or anything else. So I thought it was a big buildup for not a lot of payoff. Although I will say, I guess Mark Wayne Mullen talked to reporters today, I think sort of as a follow-up because the speech didn't go very well and trying to intimidate more people at the state level, which I thought was perfect when you did the intro about states are not only petri dishes, they are the ones who decide how elections are held and how people vote and when they vote and where they vote. And that is it's always a giant responsibility. It is enormous now when we have all these threats from the federal government about how we have our elections.
Yeah. It really is amazing. And I hear Donald Trump was not happy that every network didn't carry his speech live in its entirety. But, do you think he can honestly be surprised by that? I mean, that was, I've got some big news. Oh, my gosh, I've got some big news. You've got to tune in tomorrow night. No, actually, we don't.
What's interesting, I heard some commentators talking, and I had forgotten this, to be honest, is that not only was it not newsworthy, it was a political speech, but I had forgotten that Obama's immigration speech in 2014 was not covered by the networks. A Biden speech, I think it must have been about the economy where he wanted prime time, was not covered by the networks. We live in a society where the networks get to decide what they want to cover, not are told what to cover. And I thought one of the more alarming parts was his threats to NBC and ABC about the fact that they didn't cover his speech, but I think that will pass.
I hope Donald Trump passes. Do you think the fact that his speech was not well received will make him in any way, shape, or form think twice about the interference he's clearly planning for the midterm elections?
No, I don't. I think that was a poorly planned effort and didn't have any new information. Not that there is any new information, but even the way it was presented, I'm sure there'll be a lot of other things that'll happen between now and the midterms. But again, genius is the right word, but the interesting part about our system is that if states stand up and fulfill their duty and fight back through the courts and other ways, I think we can still have a reasonably fair and open and honest midterm election. And I guess that, judging by the polls, I think that's what he's afraid of.
Yeah, I think so too. Hey, a couple of things. One thing that I'm not even sure if I mentioned this, it kind of flew under the radar that the House of Representatives voted to make daylight savings time permanent. And, I've always been one of those people who said, I don't care whether it's daylight savings time or standard time. Just pick one. Just pick one and lock it in. And I don't really care which one it is. And one of the columnists in Chicago wrote that basically he doesn't care either, but he's tired of the back and forth. But one of the complaints about daylight savings time is, I guess, in the winter, it would mean that sunrise, at least in the Chicago area, wouldn't happen till after 8 a.m. And that's something that has a lot of people kind of upset. What do you think of this whole thing? Because everybody complains about it, but nobody seems to be able to agree on exactly what we should do.
Well, yeah, it's just a matter of whether you want in the winter, do you want to get up and go to work or start your day or whatever in the dark, or do you want to come home in the dark?
Yeah.
Those are the two options. I think where I am, I think sunrise might not even be until 8:30 in the winter, And right now, when we have daylight, when we set the clocks back or whatever in the winter, it's light at 8 o'clock or 7:30, but it's dark at 5. So you just have to pick. And I'm sort of like you. I don't actually care, but I don't even know if we should lock it in. But it's probably smart. I just want to stop talking about it because I think there's so many more important things. I don't quite understand all the furor about that. And there's all sorts of things though that what if farmers' days are different? People, there are a lot of things that you don't really think about.
And
so
I've heard that parents who have young children are worried about their kids having to go to the stop for the school bus in the morning in the dark.
Right.
The fear is that there will be more accidents.
Right. So, right. I think when there's not I'm not sure what the crying need is what I guess I would say. So we're going to, but it is bizarre that we're all, I guess I am a little, everybody's all worked up about the clock and look at all the other things that are happening.
Yeah.
That's what the House can pass. They can't pass hardly anything else.
Yeah. Isn't that ridiculous? I think I have no dog in this hunt. I don't care which one they pick. I would like them to pick one because I don't think he's listening, Chris, but my partner, every time the time changes for 3 days, he complains about how tired he is. And it must be the fact that we changed the clocks. And, I can't take it anymore, Chris.
I will say this. The hardest part for me is that, now everything, my phone, my computer, everything changes automatically except and I finally have a car, although I bought a used car. I'm going to have to change that soon. But this is the first car I've ever had that changes. And it used to take me 3 months to figure out how to change the clock in my car every 6 months.
Yeah, most people I know just leave it on one time and they just know, okay, like right now I have to add an hour. Okay. Oh, now it's right again. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the hardest one.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about your newest podcast. And it talks about something that we talk about all the time, food benefits and how so many people are going to find it more difficult, if not impossible, to get help buying food. Talk about that, would you?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, just as an initial comment, it's just hard to imagine that we are I feel like there's a segment of our political leadership in our country, although I don't think when you talk to them individually, they would say that is so obsessed with making it harder for people who are struggling to eat. I just have a hard time with that. So this week's podcast, Stories from the States, interviews a woman from West Virginia who had a job and her parents were both aging and didn't have any money and didn't know what they were going to do. So she left her job to take care of her 2 elderly parents who moved to West Virginia from Virginia, and things were much worse than she had thought. It was really hard for them to make ends meet. So she qualified for a while for SNAP benefits, but she was under 65. She's in her early 60s, and the work requirements kicked in. Both her parents passed away. She developed all sorts of health problems, and they cut her food stamp benefits to $24 a month because she wasn't working. And I thought to myself, so here's a person, we talked to her, and you can hear her story in her own voice on Stories from the States. So here's a person who literally sacrificed almost everything to take care of people, her parents, who she loved, who had nobody else to help them. No way they lived in a rural part of West Virginia, and they relied on SNAP just to make sure they had enough food to eat while she was taking care of them. And the response of the government in a new policy was to say, nope, sorry, we're not going to help you anymore. You're on your own. And I think that the poignancy of that to me, of course, is not just her case, but is what happens. It happens so many times that I'm sure there is some small amount of fraud in every single program, but boy, aren't we obsessed with the small amount of fraud in a program that is overwhelmingly helping people and helping people eat. And I've never quite understood the obsession with that. And this is a case where there wasn't fraud, and it was much harder for her to feed herself and to get back on her feet after making the sacrifice. And I just, it's just hard to imagine that we wouldn't want to figure out ways. If there's a better way to help people, a better system, a better way to deliver it, by all means, let's do all that. But the idea that we would want to deny basic human decency and food to somebody, I've never quite understood. But that's the era we're living in, I guess.
And every time you have a program, especially a government program, you have to keep track of it. You have to keep your eye on it. You have to have it audited. And you have to hopefully employ honest people to manage it. But there will be problems from time to time. I mean, we've seen this in all different kinds of people elected as state reps or state senators or at the federal level, that suddenly there's, they're being taken to task for inappropriately using campaign funds or something like this. We can't take our eye off the ball. But to punish an entire country's worth of people who need help buying food because in one or two places that somebody tried to take advantage of the program, it doesn't seem that doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't seem reasonable to me.
No, and it also makes an assumption I think that's worth considering, which is the assumption when people blame the poor. By the way, I saw The Atlantic had a magazine the other day that said the war on poverty is over, the rich people won. And I thought it was a really good headline. But we have this assumption that people want to be poor, that they're happy just getting by, and that they want to get a few extra dollars a month, and that they're not trying to help themselves. And I'm sure that right-wing consultants or whatever could find one case or two cases, but the vast, overwhelming majority of people don't want to do that. And I remember last fall we talked to a guy who ran a food bank who was talking about the people he comes in to see him are and don't want to be there. They don't want to have to go ask for food. Mm-hmm. They don't want to have to show up at a food bank. They don't want to be on SNAP. Right. They just want to eat until they can figure out what else they can do. So it's pretty hard to get back on your feet if you can't eat, or it's pretty hard to figure out a way to take care of yourself if you can't meet that basic necessity. So I just feel like there's an assumption always. And by the way, while I'm on the subject, it's the same thing with Medicaid, where there's fraud occasionally, but the giant fraud that's cost hundreds of millions or billions of dollars is often corporations or large healthcare interests. It's not somebody who gets a X-ray that he or she's not maybe not entitled to, or that's not covered. It's always interesting how we always focus all the attention, all the resources on trying to ferret out the fraud by the least of these and ignore it from the wealthy folks. And in this case, there's no fraud there. And the procedures we put in place actually make it harder for people like this West Virginia woman to be able to eat 3 meals a day and get back on her feet after what was a terrible health crisis, after taking care of her parents who were dying. I can't quite imagine that we live in this sort of world where that is possible.
I think if you want to reduce it down to the most common denominator, I think there's a different philosophy. People who tend to be Democrats, believe that government, one of the functions of government is to make people's lives easier, to help people solve problems that they have. And it always has seemed to me that the Republicans, their attitude is, nope, you got to do all that on your own. That's not what government is for. Government maybe is how we're going to fund a military, but, if you don't have enough food, if you don't have enough money to keep going, if you have all these other problems, I'm sorry, but that's on you. That's on you.
Yeah, and I mean, really, when it comes down to it, I've had all these philosophical debates over the years with people on the other side about what government really is. In many ways is a way we just organize ourselves to make sure everybody has a reasonable opportunity and a decent life, and we take care of each other, and that's the way to do it. It's not the perfect system, but it seems better than a random private system and leave people on their own and social Darwinism and all the rest of it. So you're right. It's a bizarre philosophy, but I actually believe that there's something else. I think the doctrine of the right and the people who are sort of running the right-wing policy institutes and the people in Washington who adhere to those, that's also abstract. And I think if you ask them, if they met this woman in West Virginia, I'd like for them to meet people like that and say, okay, what is she supposed to do? What would you have her do? What would you have the person in your district do? It's really easy when you have you're trying to find money for tax cuts or bombs or whatever it is, to ignore all these things. But when it comes to actual human beings, if you know them, if you know who they are, that's why I think actually Americans have, in many folks who live in our country now, have been misled by all that rhetoric for so long. But in their own communities, I think it's a little harder. And it's, when you know people who are struggling and you want them to be figured out, well, then there's really no other way to do that works,
There were I heard some brief rumblings from some Republicans when it was made public that they were going to put in place all these Medicaid cuts. There were, I remember hearing some Republicans say, well, my constituents rely heavily on Medicaid. That's not really something that I wanted to see cut, though I guess when push came to shove, they were all very, very quiet. I remember there was one congressperson, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wrote that she approached this person and said to them, look, there's no cameras here right now. I'm not recording this. It's just you and me. Why would you support these Medicaid cuts when it means that we've got the data? I've seen the data. There will be hospital closures in your district. Rural hospitals are going to be hit hard, and hospitals in your district are going to close. And she said, the congressperson looked at her and said, I don't believe your data. I don't believe that's true. And she continued on with her story, and she said that this person and other Republicans she's talked to didn't want to believe it was real when they were hearing this from Democrats, but then they started getting calls from hospital CEOs in their district, and the hospital presidents and CEOs were calling their congresspeople and saying, look, we're going to have to shut our doors. Do you understand that? Do you understand how much we rely on Medicaid payments to stay afloat in this rural area? And then all of a sudden, it was suddenly like they woke up to the situation. But I mean, that's a bad example of how our partisanship has really affected people's decision making. But it's also exactly an illustration of what you said. If people had to sit down with this woman, Helen Comer, and hear her story, and especially if she lived in their district, oh my God, they'd be all over this.
Right, I know. And the healthcare is as hard or harder to understand, because if somebody in a rural district has some terrible thing happen to them, they're going to go to the emergency room, I hope. And our laws and our Hippocratic oaths and all the rest of it mean we're going to have to take care of that person. So wouldn't we want to prevent them from being there in the first place? Wouldn't we want to make sure her children had medicine? Wouldn't we want to do all the things? If you're cold-hearted, even if you don't care about them as people, it doesn't make any sense to deny people basic level health care, no matter their income level, because they're not only is their lives at stake, but you mentioned the hospital, the economy, the fact that we're going to have to figure out a way when things are really bad and they're at the emergency room. None of this really makes sense. I've never understood the healthcare argument. I know it's not perfect around the world, but most places have figured out at least some basic safety net, so people don't have to worry about this. And here somehow now Medicaid is a dirty word in most places.
I'm talking to Chris Fitzsimons. The States Newsroom does a podcast called Stories from the States. Chris joins me most Fridays so we can talk about what they're covering. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
CPT 820.
Podcast called Stories from the States that is put out by the States Newsroom. You should be subscribing to it to find out what is going on in the country, especially outside of Illinois, because I can't always get to everything. One thing that I want to talk to you about, and this is a little off topic, Chris, Lindsey Graham's death and all of the conspiracy theories surrounding Mitch McConnell's hospitalization. Just, they released this picture of Mitch smiling. A lot of people have pointed out that he's wearing the same clothes and has the same bruise on his hand from a picture from 2023. Even some Republicans I've read believe that it's a fake picture. it says a lot about where we are as a country, also where we are with AI. What do you think of all this that's going on?
Well, I don't know. I'm sure you may have already said this, but this afternoon, President Trump announced that it was encouraging Lindsey Graham's sister to actually not just fill the unexpired term of Lindsey Graham, her brother, but actually run for the office in the upcoming primary. And it looks like, I don't know if she has stated it publicly, but there are strong indications that she is now going to run to be a full-time senator, which I think is sort of interesting given her background and all the rest of it. So we could talk about that. Mitch McConnell thing is so bizarre. I think it's like you said, it's as much a commentary on the times. It's so bizarre that he was holding a sports page from the newspaper.
Like a hostage. It was like
right,
it was like he was being ransomed. Oh, I have proof of life.
Right.
Look at the date.
Right. And all he had to do, of course, well, I guess people would have maybe said the same thing, was either record an audio interview with all the people who said they talked to him, which I don't know if they talked to him or not, or have some video of him interacting with somebody, which would have quelled some of the conspiracy theories, but not all of them. But, regardless, in the Senate, you can't vote unless you show up. Mm-hmm. So the Republicans are down a vote. I'm not sure what's going to happen to McConnell. I guess there is a deadline by which Thomas Massey or whomever, that they have to have an election, which I guess that's the first week of August. So I guess that's a lot of the speculation. But so two things. One is, you mentioned it already. It's a microcosm of the times we're in, and AI and all the conspiracy theories that have become mainstream. So people now don't know what to believe. And the second one is, isn't it time? It's another reminder of all the generational logjam we have. Chuck Grassley, I tell people this all the time who don't follow politics. Chuck Grassley in Iowa was elected to a 6-year term at 88. Did you know that Chuck Grassley's grandson has been the Speaker of the House in the Iowa legislature?
Good God.
I mean, how in the world? I don't know what we do about it, but and they're, obviously Feinstein and other folks. That is one of the reasons I think that people feel like, with some justification, that people in Washington don't understand what's happening in America anymore, because when you're 88 or 90 or 84 and infirmed, it really is hard to keep up, not only with what's happening in the Senate or the House or whatever, but how in the world can you know what's happening in your community and in the country and make decisions? I mean, I'm getting old, but I just can't imagine having somebody 88 years old getting a 6-year term, or having our entire gerontocracy running the country. That's one of the many things I think is what's happening, in Democratic primaries and everywhere. People have had it, not just with the establishment, but the age, the sort of who's ruling us. Now we got the vice president taking his son to a golf lesson on a helicopter. I mean, have we ever lived in a time when there was such a big difference between our leaders and the average folks in America? I'm not sure we have.
No. And my understanding with the situation with Mitch, if he is incapacitated or dead or simply out of the picture, there will be a special election called, unless this question isn't answered until August 3rd or after. My understanding is that if they can keep this confused till August 3rd, then there will be no special election to fill the seat. Because I think you're right. Thomas Massey, who has really not too many to give anymore, has basically said, you know what, I'll run for that seat, and he just might win. And wouldn't that be an interesting, I would love to see that. Oh, please, please.
Oh, well, he had a great quote recently. You probably saw it, where he's just said he doesn't understand Trump's election obsession. They won the House, they won the Senate, they won the White House, they control the Supreme Court. What are we complaining about?
Exactly.
The way the elections are run. I thought that was pretty smart.
Yeah, that's what he said. We literally have every base of power you could ask for, and all we do is complain. What sense does that make? Yep. Chris, thank you so much for being here. It is always a pleasure to talk with you. Talk to you next week.
You too, Joan.
Okay.
All righty, bye-bye.
We are going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
You know, if you know anything about me or my background, you know that I am fascinated with NASA and its work, fascinated with what astronauts do. And in this time of budget cutbacks, it is more necessary than ever that we know what's going on with NASA and that we know how to make our voices heard. I'm welcoming back Jack Corrali, who's the Director of Government Relations at the Planetary Society. Jack, thank you so much for being here.
Joan, thank you for having me back on. Great to talk to you again.
And just to be clear, I want the audience to know the Planetary Society is nonpartisan and focuses a lot on things like policy. If I'm not mistaken, there's now a suggestion. Where's this? Hang on, I've got the number here somewhere, Jack. Hold that thought of how much this current administration wants to cut NASA's budget is something like 40-something%. Do I have that right?
Yeah, 46% is the proposed cut to NASA's science programs, all a part of a 24% cut to the full agency. But it's those science programs, that's the things that give you those.
Explain the difference. What the difference is between cutting science programs and cutting the agency, because I think a lot of people think that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a very integrated, a lot of integrated activities at NASA that cut across its different areas of activity. And so you have human space flight, that's your Artemis program, which is kind of labeled exploration, though I think for us lay people, I think exploration has a much broader definition, but within NASA, exploration primarily focuses on human space flight. Then you have the International Space Station, which is another, kind of sub-budget line, which is also facing cuts. And then you have the science program, which I would think of it as that's your research programs. That's the soft money. That's people, using data to make major discoveries, but that's also the spacecraft themselves, right? That's the James Webb Space Telescope. That's the Perseverance rover on Mars. That's the New Horizons spacecraft that we just celebrated last week or earlier this week, the anniversary of it flying by Pluto back in 2015. That's the science program is the one that brings those amazing photos and data down from places across our solar system and with our telescopes, other places in our galaxy and universe. And that's what's facing this existential threat of a 46% cut.
So when you say science, I guess I immediately thought, you always see these pictures of the astronauts at the space station and they're like watering plants and they're looking at things under a microscope. It's more than just that.
Right. I mean, this is all of your robotic explorers. These are the telescopes. One of the areas that I think tops the charts in terms of public polling on space priorities, I think all of us don't want to go the way of the dinosaurs and face extinction from asteroids and comets. The entire program that NASA operates to look for and then potentially mitigate asteroid impact is funded out of NASA's science programs, which is facing these massive cuts, right? And so it's both the esoteric, big picture, looking at the universe and understanding our cosmic origins, but it's also the very practical and understanding, how our planet interacts with the sun, so the heliophysics. It's understanding climate change and the sort of the systems that exist here on Earth, and it's preventing doing what the dinosaurs couldn't, the ancient dinosaurs couldn't, and potentially prevent an asteroid impact here on Earth.
I also want to ask you about, you said that there's the science program cuts and the administrative cuts. When you say the administrative cuts, does that mean like getting rid of the vice president of asteroids kind of a position?
Well, there's a lot that goes into supporting these missions, right? It's building it, right, and maintaining the infrastructure. So we talk to all of these missions, or all of these spacecraft across the solar system, and even the ones that have humans on them, so like Artemis 2, we communicate to them through something called the Deep Space Network. And that's not a big, sexy topic to talk about, our comms infrastructure, but that's vitally important to maintain that continuous communication with when you have astronauts on board, but also when you have, multi-billion-dollar space missions that are exploring places on Mars or orbiting Jupiter, seeing things that humans have never seen before through our robotic avatars. And if we don't invest in those, I guess maybe more administrative, right, maintaining this infrastructure, we also lose out. And one of the problems facing NASA is that with this aging infrastructure that we have a space program built for the 1960s and 70s, but we have 120 missions just within the science programs. That's your telescopes, rovers, probes, 120 missions that are either operating or in development. And that requires a lot of bandwidth, right? And you don't have 5G on the moon. You don't have 5G at Mars. And so, relying on good old radio frequency to keep in contact. It worked very well, but it's upgrading those things. You have a mission called Psyche, which is going to a metal asteroid. You may have seen this. The asteroid is estimated to be worth however many quintillion dollars, because it's the interior of a planetesimal, basically a very early proto-planet. Maybe at one point it was a planet in the early stages of our solar system. Well, NASA's actually using that mission to help develop this communications infrastructure as well. They have a laser communicator on board, which increases the bandwidth quite substantially. But the rest of the program's still using good old radio frequency.
Now, you mentioned Psyche, that this whatever asteroid, planetesimal, whatever it is, it's worth a lot of money. Is that because it's like filled with space material, rare earth minerals? It's filled with gold or silver?
Yeah, it's filled with all those things that here on Earth, we have to dig down really far to find, the heavier elements, right? When the Earth formed, 4 billion years ago, all of those heavy elements, the things that weigh more, sunk to the bottom and are closer to our planet's core. That's true for all planets, right, in our solar system. And so a planetesimal, it's a piece of an ancient planet's core that was part of our solar system, during its formation over the past, few billion years. And so it's some of the densest parts of a planet that formed. And so you have a lot of those rare earth materials that is very difficult for us to get down there. And for folks who are worrying at home, we are not going and raiding the storehouses of the asteroid Psyche. The mission is called Psyche, but the asteroid itself is also called Psyche. We're not going there to pilfer that quite yet, maybe, but it's helping
I read a
us
lot of science fiction and asteroid mining in the science fiction future. Asteroid mining is a thing. And, I know that you said that this Psyche mission is kind of designed to teach us how to improve communication. But, asteroid mining is not too far away in our future. And wouldn't we rather mine some of these rare minerals from an asteroid than, strip mine and destroy our own planet? I'm all for it. I say we allot some funds for asteroid mining equipment.
Well, we should do a survey of the asteroids first, and that's in part what the Psyche mission is doing, is helping us understand what does the population of these asteroids look like. What does that surface? Because we've never imaged it outside of a couple pixels from a ground-based observatory. And so Psyche, the mission, again, it gets confusing because the asteroid is also named Psyche. When Psyche visits Psyche, it'll be helping us understand what do these places look like, so that we're doing that survey of the small bodies of our solar system.
How far away is this? Is this the Kuiper Belt?
No, the asteroid Psyche is a main belt asteroid. So it's between the Earth and Mars.
Okay. So we need to figure out how to improve our communications. Was that also a part of this last Artemis mission with people, how we flew around the dark side of the moon? Because as far as I know, there's no way to continue that communication when you're on the far side of the moon.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And there, if folks remember, there was, I think it was about a 40-minute blackout period in which we couldn't communicate with the crew, and that's because we lost line of sight with them, because our entire we have 3 major ground stations as part of the Deep Space Network. One in California, one in Spain, one in Australia, and that gives us more or less, 100% coverage of the sky at any one time. And that allows us to communicate with these missions. But when you got the moon in the way, you have no line of sight with Earth. You can't use our traditional communications systems. And so there's, of course, going to be developments made with the Artemis 3 mission and eventually with Artemis 4 being a landing on the lunar surface to enable more constant communications and better bandwidth of communication, right? It's not just about that constant connection, but also how much data you can send both ways. And there's a big push right now, I think, to a handful of contracts have been put out to develop this infrastructure around the moon, so that just like we have communication satellites around the Earth to help keep us on Earth in constant communication with our friends around the world. Building out a communications network at the moon is going to be very important, because maybe you lost sight, line of sight with Earth, but maybe there's a relay satellite that's orbiting, the moon that you can relay, you can bounce your signal off of that and still remain in that constant communication, with Earth, so that you don't have those blackout periods, whether it's on the lunar far side or otherwise.
Jack, we need to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk to you. I know that there's that the cuts that the government wants to NASA are in the billions of dollars, and I want to talk more about what specific things that we would lose when we make these cuts. Jack Corrali is the Director of Government Relations at the Planetary Society. We are going to continue our discussion right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It has been reported by Reuters and other news organizations that in the 2027 budget, the current administration wants to cut $5.6 billion out of NASA's budget. In addition to just basic administrative costs, that would make a big dent in science programs. Jack, what are some of the programs that we would lose? Would Psyche go by the way?
Psyche, thankfully, would still be flying. It just launched a couple years ago, so thankfully that mission stays whole. But 53 missions would not see a future after these budget cuts would be implemented. Missions like New Horizons, we talked about, flew by Pluto 11 years ago, would be shut off. That's out in the Kuiper Belt. Still making discoveries, just survived a year-long hibernation and is now back and actively collecting data in the Kuiper Belt. We would lose Juno, which is the only mission currently orbiting Jupiter. And then we would lose this mission called OSIRIS-APEX, which just in classic NASA fashion is one big, long acronym. But what OSIRIS-APEX, the apex part of that name, stands for Apophis Explorer. In 2029, on April the 13th, and yes, it is a Friday, there is going to be a massive asteroid that passes between not just the Earth and the Moon, but between Earth and our geostationary satellites.
Oh,
You're gonna be able to
that's
see
pretty
this
low.
thing. It's pretty low. It is a astronomically small chance, microscopically small chance that it hits. This is if you remember, it was maybe 2004, 2005. I distinctly remember this because it's kind of what turned me on to planetary defense as this idea that we could understand that maybe, there are we're in a cosmic shooting gallery with asteroids whizzing by all the time. And Apophis is going to be flying very close to the Earth to better understand that asteroid which, by the way, Apophis is the Egyptian god for anxiety. So there's that too. To better understand this, we have a spacecraft that was already in space. It's actually the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft, which dropped off. It did a sample return mission of another nearby asteroid, dropped that off in the Utah desert just 3 years ago. And we repurposed it, right? This is saving taxpayer dollars. We're repurposing something that's already in orbit, already has enough propellant, already paid for, and we're just going to fly by this Apophis mission to help study that asteroid so we understand that should we face an asteroid threat in the future, different tactics, right? You think, oh, well, we'll just send a nuclear device like they do in Armageddon up to a potentially hazardous asteroid.
Bruce Willis is no longer
and
available.
Bruce Willis
so,
too.
We got problems.
But the problem with the additional problem with asteroids is they're not all the same. They're not all these solid body objects. And so to understand what tool at our disposal, of which, nuclear devices, a very extreme one, not always going to be the most effective at planetary defense. You have a kinetic impactor, which we successfully tested, the DART mission built by the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. So this is kind of getting a little away from me, but there's these missions that are part of this grand strategy for science and discovery that we call them the decadal surveys. You can refer to them as these kind of science strategy documents that are the foundation of U.S. leadership in space and space science. And this budget request would turn off 53 of those missions, including the ones I mentioned: New Horizons, Juno, OSIRIS, APEX. But we have missions around Mars that would get shut off. Funding for the rovers, Curiosity and Perseverance, who are driving around on the surface and helping us understand the formerly wet, possibly habitable world that was Mars. They would have their funding ramped down significantly to the point that we're only operating them 1 or 2 days a week in like a worst case scenario with these budget cuts. And so, it's all of these missions that have been I think the bedrock for U.S. leadership in science and technology. We would just give up on them, which is not the future that I think you or I dreamed of when we read about science fiction, when we read these stories about what we as humans are capable of doing. We always want more, right? We want to explore more. We want to make more discoveries. Surrendering the solar system to possibly other countries that are willing to make those investments is not a sound strategy.
Well, that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, because, everybody remembers, John F. Kennedy declaring that we were going to go to the moon. And that was wonderful and it was glorious. But a lot of that was motivated by a fear that if we didn't ramp up our space program, that we would be eclipsed. And at that point, I think it was the USSR we were worried about. But the idea, I don't know if it's still in orbit, but I know China sent up their own space station. And, if we back away from this, we are pretty much simply, opening the door for China or Russia or some other entity to take over, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, we at the Planetary Society, we're nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We celebrate all space exploration goals, right? But I think at the core of it, the U.S. has been such an amazing leader in science and technology because we have understood that scientists are the best ones to determine what the best science is to pursue, and that we have these structures and programs set up in a way that a lot of countries are emulating. You look at China's space science program, and it's almost a 1-for-1, right? And so, you bring up President Kennedy's speech and the Space Race 1.0, that was a very, I think, that was human space flight only, right? That was really focused on getting, boots on the moon. And this, we'll call it Space Race 2.0, though I have some problems with that fit in the kind of grand scheme of how our motivations kind of play out in space policy. I think it should be more ecumenical than just a sort of us versus them mentality. But in this Space Race 2.0, let's call it that, it's getting humans back to the moon, but it's also returning samples from Mars. It's creating planetary defense capabilities. It is building the telescope that might be able to directly image a habitable world orbiting another star, potentially answering, I think, what would be the greatest discovery in human history, whether or not we're alone in the universe. And all of that is on the table, right? And, in addition to these budget cuts, the Office of Management and Budget, which historically has been a very bureaucratic, these are, paper pushers over at the Executive Office building, kind of with Director Vogt in charge, have really become very ideologically driven, that fundamental science discovery, curiosity-driven science is somehow a waste of taxpayer money, when this is what gave us modern life. And these new rules that were proposed just at the end of May as part of what they call the uniform guidance, basically the grant funding rules, would basically put partisan politics ahead of science. And this isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. This is across the board. If you're a Democrat, right, you don't want a Republican administration to, just because it's inconvenient to pursue a good question in science, if it's somehow partisan in nature, right, or doesn't align with the administration's priorities, that a bureaucrat could come in and cancel that grant for no reason. In the same way, if you're a Republican and a Democratic administration is in there, you wouldn't want that either. On the flip side, the science that we pursue should be done because it's the best science, because it is the question that we are trying to answer. And scientists are the best ones there. I certainly am not qualified to determine which grant should or should not be funded. I would trust the experts. And there's that. There's basically, it would be the entire defunding of public outreach. We, the taxpayers, pay, are good tax-paying Americans, right? We pay into this system that gives us these world-class discoveries. We should learn about them. But these rules would prevent public outreach from scientists, from them using their grant dollars to tell us, the taxpayer, what it was they studied. And that, I think, is just a disservice to the American people.
So are there witness slips, or should we just call our Congress people, our senators, and say, by the way, dude, leave NASA alone?
Yes, I think right now it is an all of the above strategy. So I mentioned that uniform guidance that OMB put out. 500,000 people submitted comments, and the Planetary Society was one of the organizations that also supported that effort. 500,000 comments were submitted. 94% of them are negative, are opposed, right? And most of that remaining 6% are form messages that are in favor, and so are not personalized in the way that the vast majority of them are. But right now we're kind of in this limbo period, and it's going to be up to Congress and the courts to determine what the path forward is for these new grant rules. And then for funding, of course, that is ultimately the job of the Article I branch of government, our United States Congress. And I will say, across the partisan divides, across ideological divides, science still is very popular in Congress. I'm up there at least every week talking to folks on both sides of the aisle, and people get it, but there's so many competing priorities. And so if you can take the time to join our Save NASA Science campaign, to write your member of Congress, to call their office, to schedule a meeting while they're in district during this upcoming August recess, that helps move the needle and shows that space and science are these unifying topics that we as humans are innately curious, and that we should be leaning into advancing human knowledge and leading the world in scientific discovery. And that now's not a time for surrender. We are all on board
for that, Jack. And okay, everybody listening, you've got your marching orders. Did you get that? Jack Corrali, Director of Government Relations at the Planetary Society. Jack, thanks for bringing this to our attention.
Of course. Thank you, Joan, for having me.
Take care. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
You may recall when I was speaking to Mark Turcott last week that he mentioned that there is going to be an event at the Newberry Library. It is going to be a week from tomorrow. I have to check my calendar here to make sure I am oriented. Yes, it is a week from tomorrow at the Newberry Library, and it is going to be a celebration of Poetry Slam's 40th anniversary. We would like to talk to somebody who is very much involved in that. In fact, the Newberry Library has taken possession of his entire Poetry Slam collection. It is Mark Kelly Smith. Mark is here right now to talk about poetry, the slam, and what's happening at the Newberry Library. Mark, how are you?
How are you? Hot day, huh?
Yeah. Are you going to be at this event Saturday the 25th?
Not only me, but
Mark, you just dropped out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I didn't get your answer as to when I asked you if you were going to be at the event, you said not only me, and then you dropped out, so we don't know who else you were getting ready to tell us about.
Yeah, but several of the slammers that are around at the very beginning, the Chicago Poetry Ensemble, Sin Salach, Lisa Piscani, Billy Lombardo, several people performing. And I'll be doing a little narrative about how everything began in Chicago.
And you had a big role in getting everything off the ground in Chicago. Tell people about that.
I'm the guy. I'm the guy.
You're the guy.
I'm the guy that started it all. It started at a little place called the Get Me High Jazz Club in Bucktown before anybody knew where Bucktown was. And then we moved to the Green Mill in 1986. And the show ran up until COVID. It was the longest running show in Chicago, 35 years every Sunday night.
Mark, what gave you the idea that, hey, I think this would be really interesting. Let's get a bunch of poets up on stage behind a microphone to read and or perform their work in front of a crowd. Nobody had ever done that before.
No, they had done it way in the past. Poetry was always can imagine Homer standing up there doing what we did. But it got lost in the 20th century, and the poets really regarded people trying to perform as being a negative to poetry. But that was the secret, it's performance. Mm-hmm. And why I started it, I wrote for many, many years and then started going to poetry readings, and they were just not what the art of poetry should be. They were, a lot of them stuffy, scholarly, didn't have the passion. And I knew that's why they didn't have the audience to listen to them. So,
and also, too, I remember from when I was younger, because I've always enjoyed poetry, but one thing that used to frustrate me was you'd read a poem and you couldn't understand it unless either the author or some academic annotated it. Oh, by this, they mean this. Oh, and this is a reference to this thing that happened in the author's life. And it was like, by the time you finished studying it, it was like the poetry had lost all of its power.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate assessment, I would say. And when you're on the stage, you really only have one chance, so you can't be too highfalutin. You got one chance maybe to get through to people. And,
and also, too, one of the things that I love about spoken word poetry, some of the poetry I read is interesting, but spoken word poetry has a rhythm to it, a rhythm that I think enhances the words. And when you read poetry, sometimes there's a rhythm that you can understand when you read, but a lot of times it just seems like it's almost like prose, like a little excerpt that was pulled out of a novel. And I like that rhythm. I'm not even talking about rhyming words, but there's a rhythm to it, like music.
Truly, that's my theory's always been that the poetry is the musicality of words, and that's certainly what we do in many different ways. The slam performers, and it's all over the world. It's what I started in Chicago. There was a need for it, not only in Chicago, but a need all over the world, and it's become quite a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And the Newberry Library is going to have the root connections to it. So we hope that people from all over the world, we're going to go out to the slammers across the world and let them know that if they want to find the original story, they go to the Newberry Library to find it.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, I know that all of your papers, the Newberry is going to take possession of them. What kind of papers are they? I mean, what are they? Are they poems you've written? Are they, things that you
It's more information about the slam beginnings. There's some of my works that are in there, but it's flyers, early videotapes, VHS tapes, recordings, books, artifacts that deal with all the people in Chicago that made this happen. Yeah. The sad thing when I go overseas to these different places, they yearn to know those early personalities that in any kind of art movement, a lot of the early people who made things happen get forgotten as it goes along. And my mission for this is to have a place where people can find out those people that really made it, because they were very courageous, because the established poetry world did not like us at all. Oh, we're performers. We shouldn't be doing that. They were wrong. It's and those people that started at the beginning were very courageous to break the conventions of how you're supposed to present poetry on a stage. And they need to be remembered.
Lisa Bucani was one of the first people. I have her book, Jangle, which it's older than my son, and he just turned 32. So I remember, I don't know how I came across her, but she was performing. I don't know if the Green Mill was going then, or if I just didn't know about it. I wasn't very clued in, Mark. But she performing.
She started at the Green Mill. You probably saw her at Big Goddess Powwows that she and Paula Killen put on at the Metro. It's probably where you ran into her.
Well, I just remember loving her work, and seeing her perform it live was just riveting. I don't know. Unfortunately, by the time Mark Turcott told me about this, I have another commitment for Saturday the 25th, so I don't think I'm going to be able to get down there. But please tell Lisa that she has one very huge fan who's been a fan for decades of hers.
I will do that. She was very, very important to the performance art scene in Chicago during the late 80s and 90s.
Yeah. And Mark, we need to take a break. I'm talking to Mark Smith. His early collection of work about the Poetry Slam has now been acquired by the Newberry Library, and there's going to be a huge celebration of him and a lot of other poets Saturday the 25th at the Newberry Library. And I believe people are supposed to get tickets, but I looked into this. What date was this? I looked into this a week or two ago, and at that point, I was told the event was nearly sold out. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, get on the Newberry Library website, literally right now. Mark Smith and I are going to take a real quick break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Saturday, the 25th, there's going to be a celebration at the Newberry Library in downtown Chicago. The 40th anniversary of Poetry Slams. The founder, the father of the Poetry Slam, Mark Smith, is going to be there. Some of the people who were early performers at Poetry Slams are going to be there. They're going to be reading their works. If you're interested in getting a ticket, you better scurry because they're almost gone. And I want to talk to you, Mark, about Tony Fitzpatrick. When did you first meet Tony?
Tony was a major player at the Green Mill in those early days, and it's too bad that he all passed on last year, and it's too bad he couldn't be there for this because he was an integral part of what was happening.
Yeah,
because we all had to have quite a bit of guts to do what we did, and of course we know Tony. Give him a rough assignment. He's gonna take care of business.
Yeah, yeah. I think I don't know the date of his last visit to the Green Mill to perform, but I'm pretty sure I was there. I wanted to go see Tony, but I also wanted to actually meet in person Mark Turcotte. I had talked with Mark on the radio, but we had never actually met in 3 dimensions. That was a really, really fascinating day. And I'm telling you, standing room only.
Yeah, no, that was a beautiful night. And Tony really, he took a chance like everybody, the Green Mill's been a place where lots of people take a chance doing stuff, really being vulnerable. And he did so that night. It was a beautiful poem he did about his wife and that, yeah.
And that's another thing about the Poetry Slam performances. Correct me if I'm wrong, but most of what I have heard on the occasions when I've been at these things, it's not the sort of typical academic poetry. It's very, very personal poetry. It's like people take things that happened in their lives or conversations they had or some emotional response they had, and they turn it into a poem. It is really very intimate in a strange way.
Yeah, it's interesting about it. Poetry Slam all across the world is all different forms, from scholarly works to just somebody writing something at the bar. But what is really interesting is that it gives everyday people a chance to express themselves, and that's what you're talking about. There's great writers that come now and perform their works, and published writers perform, like Patricia Smith, so many books that she's published. But those moments when someone, just everyday person who likes words, gets up and pulls something out of their heart and lets everybody else hear it, those moments are really special.
Yeah. And this is very personal, and it's very entertaining, but it is also widely recognized as something that's important. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Patricia Smith, wasn't she a Pulitzer Prize finalist?
Pulitzer Prize finalist, but she just last year she won the book, what is it called? The
Booker Prize?
Book Award, National Book Award.
Oh, the National Book Award.
Right. And there's poets in Germany, for instance, slam poets in Germany that have inscriptions on the literature houses, because the Poetry Slam poets now, they exist in both the published world and the stage world, and many have won all kinds of literature awards that you wouldn't think that the slammers at the beginning would ever be able to get. Tyamba just won a Pulitzer Prize for his book of poetry. I forget what the name is.
Yeah. And here's something, when I was reading about the event, explain this to me. There's going to be, before the performances, there's going to be a video cruise, slam on the street video cruise, talking to people. What's that all about?
We hope that works. That's my idea. I I worked with Kevin Covell, who I think you know. I asked him to bring two video crews to interview all the guests and get like a 2-3 minute summation of what they feel about the slam and where they found it. Almost like people at some big, you know, like the Academy Awards, where they're on the street interviewing the people as they get out of those limousines. I wanted to give it that feel. It may work, it may not work. We don't know, but that's what's going to happen with that.
And the videos, are they going to be turned around and played on the 25th, or is that something people can see at a later date?
They'll see it at a later date. We're going to make a highlights of it, and that'll become a part of the collection. You know, it's the Mark Kelly Smith collection, but it's really meant to be a place where people can deposit their stuff, and it's already happened. People are sending stuff. Hey, put this in the connection for me. You know, maybe a letter they got from somebody, or a signed poem they got from some now famous.
One thing that I wish, and I don't know if you have any ideas how this can happen, I wish that more books of poetry were more widely available. Next week on Friday, I'm scheduled to interview Jennifer Militello, who is the poet laureate of New Hampshire. And I scoured my library, and my library is connected with a bunch of other libraries, to find some of her works, and I couldn't find a single one. Now, hopefully I can dig some up on Amazon or a site like that, but it always disappoints me that poetry isn't as widely disseminated, as read as often as novels. What can we do to fix that, Mark? Paul, did I lose Mark? Is he still there? Okay. Mark,
Hello?
I can't. Are you still there? I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay. Did you hear my question? Because we didn't get your answer. So now you have to answer it all over again.
Okay. You know, my thing was performance, and why we started the performance is to build an audience for poetry. The slam audience, people for performance poetry who buy the books, is huge. And, you know, that was my effort to make it happen. I don't know, you know, there's lots of people out there sending the stuff out to, you know, make it at like Rattle Magazine. He's made a big effort to get poetry out there. You know, my thing is gathering an audience in a room, and we do that. You know, the Green Mill packed houses every time we have a show. So I don't know what the answer is to the reading public. But.
Yeah. And maybe I think part of the problem, and maybe this is just my perspective, I think part of the problem is the way poetry is taught, you know, because again, it's like, I can remember, you know, when I took these classes, and my daughter, when she was in high school, and this was part of a reading class, and these poems would be very vague. You know, it'd be like vague. And then the instructor would be like, okay, what does this mean? What do you think the author was trying to convey? What this object that's mentioned over in the poem, what does it signify? And I'm not saying that it's wrong to spend time thinking about poetry, but I think that poetry shouldn't always be that hard. You know, I think when my favorite kinds of poems, they're accessible. I read them. They show me a new perspective on something, or better yet, they make me feel something. I think that might be part of the problem there. It's such an academic, kind of, I think, dull way of teaching poetry in a lot of places.
Yeah, it certainly was what motivated us in the beginning to do what we did in Chicago. But I think things have changed. There's many performance poets that teach. There's many schools that welcome the performance poets to teach workshops and that. In fact, like in France, Yopo and Zurich, who run the Ligue de Slam France, they work like 220 days a year doing workshops in the schools, and not only them, but their colleagues in the French slam world do the same thing. So I think maybe the landscape of that has changed, and it's being taught in a different way. I don't know for sure, but I think it might have changed over these years.
Mark, I am incredibly old, and back when I was studying poetry, I'm sure nothing is taught the same way as when I was in school. I want to double check. I saw the time frame for this event at the Newberry a week from tomorrow. It's 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Is that correct?
That's correct. The first hour will be a mingling, because a lot of these people that will be there haven't seen each other for quite a while. And the first will be this mingling and the slam on the street interviews. And then from 2 to 4 will be, there'll be we have a video documentary that we're going to show about the collection coming into the Newberry. And then there'll be performances by, Lisa Mascani, and Mark could be doing something, just a little snippet of poets that were around at that time. A feature of it will be the Chicago Poetry Ensemble doing one of those ensemble pieces that they think happened back in the early years.
Well, I think it's going to be a wonderful event, Mark, and thank you so much for talking with us about it. Folks, it's going to be at the Newberry Library, Saturday, July 25th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., and you will be treated to some of the most incredible poetry slam performers that I've ever met and ever heard. If you love poetry slams, you should be there. And if you don't know what Mark and I are talking about, but it sounds intriguing, you should be there.
Very good.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. And congratulations on the Newberry taking this seriously enough to want all of your early documentation of getting this off the ground.
They're great people at the Newberry. They're true Chicagoans at the Newberry.
Well, so is Mark Smith. And I'm very pleased to have this chance to talk with you about this. Good luck a week from tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That's going to do it for me for today and for this week, because, it is Friday. You have the same homework that you have every weekend. Get out there, find something that brings you joy, something that at least brings you peace, because we're in the fight of our lives, kids, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. So charge up all your batteries. Patty Vasquez is up next. One of the people joining her is Matt McNeil of The Matt McNeil Show. Tomorrow, 1 to 4, it is Edwin Eisendrath. He's going to talk to Bill Scher from Washington Monthly Magazine, and Ben Wickler, who is a former chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. He's written a book, and he has a new television show out. Edwin Eisendrath, 1 to 4 p.m. on Saturday. Patty is coming up right now. We'll be back here on Monday. We, among other folks, we're going to talk to Brian Endless, political science professor from Loyola. He is always interesting, informative, and fun. Those are the things I like. Okay, thank you to Paul Shavari for stepping in for Bedelia when she doesn't feel well. Appreciate you, Paul. And that's it. I am going to have a relaxing weekend. Paul, you can take a little bit of time off, okay? I give you permission.
Okay, but I gotta watch that World Cup final on Sunday.
Oh yeah, sports. Okay, fine, but that's love. That's not work.
No, it is work.
Okay. I will see you Monday, folks. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend. Good night.